Chapter 8, Social Development and Adolescence. Here are the learning objectives for Chapter 8. Describing the social development changes in adolescence. During this time, adolescents move from being dependent on their parents to trying to find their own independence and also trying to figure out who they are. So that will play a change in their relationships with their family members, specifically their parents. So there might be more conflict just because they want to do things themselves. They might not think their parents know what they're going through. They might not think their parents have the right answers. They know they need their parents for their wants and their needs, a safe place to live. Parents still pay for, everything that they need. But they might want more independence as far as being with friends or dating or just trying to explore new realities for themselves. So they might reject their parents' views. But then, of course, the other hand is like they don't want to pay their own bills. They might not have a job yet. They might be too young for a job, or they might not have the ability to earn enough money because they're so young. So during this time, children are able to learn responsibility, self-respect, self-reliance, as long as the parents are always there for them and able to nurture them, even if the child or the adolescent is being difficult. It's very important for parents to have standards and to take an interest into what the child is doing. So therefore, the child or adolescent is more receptive and is also safe while they're exploring and trying to figure out who they are and being combative with their parents. Parents shouldn't hold on too tight, nor should they not hold on at all. So it's very important that parents have a balance and that the adolescent feels safe overall, because that'll help them with moving on to their own independence. So parents, of course, will be hurt by what the child may say or do. They might think their child lacks appreciation or gratitude. There might be issues, of course, when it comes to chores, how they spend their time, their work, their studies, how much they spend money, morals, manners, friends, clothing, how long they spend on the phone or how they use their phone, dating, and getting a driver's license or getting a car. It's very important for parents to keep an open communication and constantly be there for their child or the adolescent, no matter what they're going through, because the adolescent will always need the parents. And it's great that the parents can be a resource for their child, so the child's not out there in the world learning things from other people or other situations. The child still is able to fall back on their parents, and that is the best way to help prepare the child. According to this textbook, is adolescent rebellion a myth? So few adolescents actually fit the stereotype. It's more of a transition phase for most children, as long as their parents are there for them. So there could be issues when it comes to behavior, how society views them, how they're perceived by their teachers. They might have heightened emotions. Some, very few, engage in dangerous behaviors. It's important that adolescents are walked through this process and they have a transition from childhood to adulthood. It needs to be gradual, serene, and just part of the process. Other cultures that take that into consideration don't have as much of a rebellion as teenagers might have here in the U.S. And that has a lot to do with culture. And that was discovered by Margaret Mead in 1935, and then also again in 2015 by Papelia and Martorell. Another big part of an adolescent's life is their peers. So it could be peers in their class, peers in their groups that they are affiliated with, sports teams. But adolescents want to be accepted by their peers. And the strongest assumption of a child becoming delinquent is depending on the family. So children will make friends, or adolescents will make friends, but the biggest way of trying to figure out if a child is going to become delinquent or rebellious is what's going on at home, whether there's fighting at home, drugs, some type of abuse going on at home, or the child doesn't feel safe. But usually if the child has everything they need, they'll go through a transition. It might not be as smooth as the parents want, but they will still in the end love their parents and have a great relationship with them after they go through certain phases. So when it comes to peer groups, usually adolescents pair up with someone who's like them. So it could be similar socioeconomic statuses, children that share the same values as them and their parents, um, adolescents from their current neighborhood. It depends on the type of school, if they have special talents, abilities. It also depends on the personality of the adolescents. But when it comes to peers, there is influences when it comes to how they dress, how they act socially, um, their habits, vocational pursuits, hobbies, and then the textbook mentions if they use or don't use drugs and alcohol during that time. So adolescents tend to identify with other teenagers. They have friends and they have peer groups that help them figure out who they are. They can discuss things that concern them or maybe something they heard on the news with their friends, and that helps them learn who they want to be and what do they value. It's very important that they have emotional support, points of reference for people that they can look to feel safe and to find the truth of who they want to be. And with their friends, they feel safe enough to compare their values, beliefs, and attitudes, and still know if those children or other adolescents will still be their friends. Also in this chapter, it talks about homeless youth. So there are a number of youth in poverty. The number is more than what it should be. Those that are in poverty feel powerlessness, hopelessness, and during their homeless stints. So this usually is due to health-related issues, maybe substance abuse, unemployment, mental health issues with the family members, unemployment for some of their parents. So social workers can help empower the youth that might have ended up homeless. It's very important to know what they're going through, let them be able to express themselves, help them find the resources that they need, let them know how important education is at that time for them, and make sure they know that they don't have to continue this path that their parents might have put them on. They can have a different life, the life that they would more likely want to deal with versus what the situations their parents might have put them in. There are some major issues that this group goes through, just like any other group may go through, and one of the large ones that have become a problem are eating disorders. It's more likely to be females that deal with this, but there are males that do experience eating disorders. The disorders are increasing. So first we're going to talk about anorexia, and that's a loss of appetite. It also, well, in anorexia, a person may still be hungry, but they don't eat. They don't eat for control. They want to have thinness. They don't believe their body is as thin as maybe the world perceives it to be. They don't have a complete view of what their body image should be. They don't want to gain weight. They might end up losing their period. They might end up losing body fat. They refuse or they deny that they are too thin. They eat very little. They want to have a perfect body, and they think that that will bring them some happiness and some control over their lives. However, when the anorexia continues, they have a deterioration of their health. They might be depressed, reduced heart rate, lower blood pressure, lowered body temperature. Their body might retain water, and their hair might become thinner. They also might experience metabolic changes. So this person, as far as personality goes, or what's typical of a person experiencing anorexia, is that they are eager to please, they're well behaved, they're looked at as a good child or a role model of a child. They get along with peers. They rarely ask for help. However, internally they are going through more than what they let on. They are insecure, self-critical, and they don't believe that they're worthy of any praise because they don't feel like they can control their eating. So usually this begins with a diet, and they feel a feeling of control that they've never had before. So they add copious amounts of exercise, and then their health begins to fail. They might engage in solitary activities when it comes to the excessive amounts of health, so that way, of exercise, so that way other people might not notice what's going on. They might wear bigger clothes so people don't see or comment on how much weight that they're losing. But they're always preoccupied with food. And then moving on to bulimia nervosa. So people might go through a binge purge cycle, usually due to some emotions that they might be dealing with. Binge can be a few minutes to hours of someone just constantly eating. It's usually fast food or unhealthy foods full of carbs, full of sugars. So it starts with a diet, then the overeating begins, which is usually triggered by some type of negative, stressful event. They feel guilt. Then once they purge for the first time, they realize that they start feeling better and feel some control. And then they might end up with a binge purge habit, where purging would be vomiting and binging, of course, would be eating. So they could binge between 1,000 and 5,000 calories when the average person, adult, eats about 3,000 calories a day. While they're eating, they might not feel the pain or the stress that they did with typically. And usually when people look at them, they're within a normal weight range. Some can be overweight, some can be slightly underweight, but it's not as obvious as when someone's anorexic. The parents are usually overweight in these situations, and sometimes they use alcoholism to deal with their depression. So they have chronic vomiting, which could lead to gum disease, could lead to bleeding, tearing of the esophagus and bleeding of the esophagus, fatigue, numbness, erratic heartbeat, kidney damage, paralysis, death, stomach cramps, nausea, ulcers, colitis, rupturing of the stomach, sore throats, diabetes, dehydration, cardiac arrhythmias, changes in metabolism. There's a lot more symptoms. It goes into dizziness, fatigue, drowsiness, guilt, anxiety, and fear. They tend to be people pleasers. They crave attention and affection. They are very insecure, and they fear being hurt and being left alone. So sometimes they're sexually promiscuous because they feel like that is something that brings people closer to them. They feel like they don't have control over their lives, and they're just also trying to escape. Moving on to binge eating disorder. So that's where people just have an urge to consume a lot of food. This can deal with cultural factors, familial factors, psychological, and environmental factors. So usually they have an increased body fat because they're eating so much. So that would be anything that's over 20% of their average weight. They will have hypertension, elevated cholesterol, diabetes, heart attacks. They're doing that to temporarily escape the pain that they have, which could be physical or psychological. They feel shame and embarrassment. Sometimes they use substances, sometimes they don't. These people are also people pleasers, like the last two diseases. They crave attention and approval. They are insecure, have low self-esteem, and experience depression. They'll have frequent diet plan failures. They avoid the warning signs in their health. They just deny it and avoid it. They are usually socially isolated, and they don't know much about nutrition and what's good for them and what's not. They don't think about the calories that they're intaking, and they do this as a way of dealing with unwanted adverse emotions. So people that end up obese because of the binge eating, they're more likely to have heart problems, health problems, kidney problems, breathing problems, osteoarthritis, cancers. They might not be able to physically move as much as they'd want to, and they might have a genetic susceptibility to it, but usually outside of that, it's because someone is binge eating. So some people, they can go back and forth between these. Some people, it just depends on how long it goes on, if they need to be placed in a hospital for treatment, or if they might need to go to counseling. They might engage in counseling with their family members. But it's really good that the family is still there to support them, help them through this, help them understand why they're having this disorder, how long it's going on, and what can they do to make it better and support their family members. When it comes to all three of these diseases, depression, alcoholism, low self-esteem, molestation, rape, or incest, feelings of worthlessness and helplessness are part of the causes. They usually, to be described, there'll be a demographic that's middle class. Mothers are over involved in their lives. Fathers are really busy with work. They have a disordered body image. They are obsessed with food. The parents might be overprotective and didn't let them learn how to be independent and how to solve issues. They don't really have support from their family. Their family might be too critical or rejecting. They might experience a lot of criticism from their family and rejection. They're overachievers. They want to score high academically and in sports. They don't believe they're lovable, but they seek out love. They might take minor insults as more than maybe another adolescent their age would take it. So when it comes to impacts of social forces, that would be basically how in the U.S. Thinness is looked at as something for people to aspire to. There's value placed on that, being slim and trim. So it's part of a socialization process. In places where people don't place as much positivity on slimness, then the adolescents in those places don't experience anorexia or bulimia nearly to the same extent, because there isn't a desire to be this perfect woman, and there's more pressure put on women. It's been an increase in the last 60 years, and that's also with TVs being brought into the homes, celebrities being idolized, and magazines and radio and music videos, and just the people who are models. There's a lot of emphasis placed on thinness and being slim, and everyone doesn't have the same body type. When it comes to treatment, there needs to be therapy for the family, medical services, and then teaching them what a normal weight is. So it could be multifaceted. Sometimes people can go to inpatient, outpatient. They could be hospitalized. They could do psychotherapy individually and then also have therapy with their family members. They need to learn about food, learn about calories, learn about the emotions that they're going through that they have been trying to avoid, and maybe start to rectify or deal with some of those emotions and what may have caused those emotions. Group therapy, interpersonal therapy, nutritional counseling, couples therapy, medications, prevention programs. A lot of this would be good for this group as far as treatment goes. Adolescents may experience some behavior or emotional issues that other groups may not experience, and a lot of that could be due to hormones or issues in the family that they're more aware of now that they're older. They could feel depression, inferiority, isolation, guilt, shyness, low self-concept, low self-efficacy, low self-esteem, phobias, anxiety. They might be hyperactive, sadistic, masochistic, aggressive, may be abused, compulsive, commit sexual deviations, violent, suicidal, vengeful. And there are some models that researchers and doctors use to deal with this population, also psychiatrists and psychologists. So the medical model is to treat the emotional behavior issues as a mental illness, and then also treat the repercussions from these diseases on the body. Then there's the interaction model, and that basically focuses on what people do every day, who they're around. So they might need to label those things in order to see it for what it is, and not maybe from their perspective, but maybe from like a medical perspective or a perspective from the therapist. So some of these could be viewed as personal disabilities, antisocial acts, deterioration of the brain, and personality changes. But some people believe that if you place labels on things, it's going to make a person like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So basically, it will make a person believe that's who they are and that's all they are, and they can't have a better life. So it just depends on the person and the situation. So labels aren't always the best way of dealing with things. It's just making sure the person gets the help that they need. Causes and treatments for this. This starts on page 379. There's rational therapy, and it has a flow of how the things should go. It talks about events, self-talk, and then emotions, and taking all that into account. I'm going to give some examples of what that might look like. And the example of it is on page 380. So how we talk to ourselves determines like how we feel and how we're going to behave. So it's important to try to change what people tell themselves. A good idea might be to put Post-its on a mirror, so they might feel that they don't look nice or that people don't like them, but then when they go in the mirror, if they wash their hands in the bathroom, maybe they'll be able to read something positive about themselves, and it'll help replace those thoughts. It's important to try to experience things as they are now, like in the moment, so that way the person is not filled with anxiety and worry. They can focus on the happiness that they're feeling in the current situation, and not feeling like they have to deal with everything all at once. So it's very important to change self-talk and to identify the irrational or negative thoughts that come to them. It could be thoughts that they might feel like they have control over, or it might be thoughts that they feel like are intrusive, but they still can learn to work against those other thoughts. So on page 381, it has a format for rational self-analysis that can be used. Basically a formula of figuring out how to help somebody as far as self-talk, emotional consequences, and the facts of the situation. So that's one thing to deal with unwanted changes in emotion. And then on page 382 to 383, it gives you an example of what this could look like. It's highlighted a self-analysis to combat unwanted emotions following the ending of a romantic relationship. So if you want more insight into that, it's great to look at the example they have highlighted in the book. Major problems that this age group might deal with would be crime and being delinquent, cyberbullying, status offenses. So those are defined as illegal if it's committed by a juvenile, but not for an adult. So that could be something like drinking or smoking. And then there's things that are bad all around for adults and for children, such as, stealing from somebody. They have juvenile court, they have juvenile therapy. As far as treatment goes, they have to look at what the child is dealing with emotionally, physically, psychologically, educationally. And the point of juvenile court and juvenile treatment is to help reform the child. There is, on page 387, it talks about sex trafficking and human trafficking, which is important to take a look at, but this age group is definitely susceptible to being trafficked, especially those that might not feel safe at home, so they might not go home, or they might be out later than they would want to. They might be looking for relationships or people that they can be around and trust, and that makes them more vulnerable if they don't have that safety at home. If children or adolescents become delinquent, it's important to understand why. So it's important to know what their thoughts were before they participated in the crime, and then during the crime, and then also what they thought about after. So that way people understand how to help them, because they know what their thoughts were. There are self-help groups, individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling. There's also penalties for a crime, which could be like a warning, fine, jail time, probation, prison time, parole, death penalty. There's a high rate of people going back to commit a crime, and they call that recidivism. but we definitely don't want children or adolescents to experience recidivism. On page 388, it talks about the Columbine Massacre, and that was from 1999. So if you want to look at the highlight 8.9, it's on page 388. More issues this group might encounter would be dealing with gang-like activity, gang-like behavior. There are 4 types of gangs. So criminal gangs want to gain things, money or influence or power through criminal activities. So it could be stealing, they could be extorting, just selling something illegal, or just doing something illegal. It could be drug trafficking, people trafficking, sex trafficking. Conflict gangs are those that deal with a certain area, so they feel like this is their turf, this is their area that they control, or that their people should be either protecting or within the community to help, and they don't want other people going to that area to cause any problems. There are retreatist gangs, and they're the ones who focus on deviant behaviors such as getting high, doing it all together, being away from school. They might be into drugs. And then there's a 4th type of gang, which would be cults or cults. So those that are involved in cults, they might worship something. It could be the devil or something evil, something mysterious or hidden. They have criminal activity, and they also practice rituals. There are some that try to be law-abiding, but they're more so deal with their own cult versus other people from the outside world. And there are different types of these groups. So when it comes to thinking of gangs, there isn't like one definition, and there isn't a lot of data that's collected when it comes to gangs. So there's no way of knowing actually how many people join gangs, how many there are. So that information would have to start being collected if we want to find ways to really combat it, especially when it comes to adolescence. So there's a theory of differential association, and so criminal behavior is basically a learning process that's taught from a small group. So it could be like the friends, family, neighborhood, and they basically get inundated through there. So people might internalize the values or want to be like somebody in the gang. It could be a family member. It could be somebody they look up to. They might like the material wealth the person has gained. So maybe that person sees that, oh, if they join the gang, well, now they could help their parents pay rent because rent isn't paid, and sometimes they end up homeless. Or maybe they could feed their younger sibling, get clothes for themselves and their younger siblings, so they'll experience less bullying. People usually join gangs when their basic needs aren't met. And moving on, there is the Onami theory when it comes to delinquency and crime. That's from Merton from 1968. And he basically said it keeps people from achieving high status goals. So the way society is, if someone is discriminated against, or if someone has lack of access to certain things that they would need, if somebody is victimized in a certain way, they might face additional barriers, and therefore they might join a gang in order to help strengthen themselves or strengthen what they need. And that goes into deviant subcultures. Basically, they have their own attitudes, values, perspectives, and they participate in criminal activity to get what they need materially, because they can get it quicker instead of, especially if they aren't old enough to have a legal job, or even if they are, they don't make enough money as an adolescent. And if they have the pressures of adulthood on them already, then they are more likely to participate in something illegal in order to help their families. And that could be people from a lower class, as far as socioeconomic status goes in the U.S. Some people do it for being tough or excited. But they have a delinquent subculture. People want a chance to belong. They want to develop their masculinity. Maybe they want to defend themselves from someone who is bullying them. It could be a family member. It could be someone at school that's bullying them. And then also when it comes to control theories, well, from this theory by he or she, It says that people would naturally commit crimes, and that's why they need leadership to basically be there just in case. So if you let people run around, they'll just be lawless. That's what this person thought. Everyone doesn't subscribe to that, but that's what the textbook talks about when it comes to control theories. And so if things are looked at through a control theory lens, then they would need police or maybe the National Guard there in order to make sure the people start behaving correctly. That way they don't hurt innocent people. So that's just another theory. So when it comes to social work and interventions, it's important that there are programs, and it could be like a detached worker. And a detached worker is somebody who goes out into the community and meets people where they're at and then tries to help them. That can also build trust and rapport during those times. Additionally, there are probation departments, delinquents that live in group homes, residential treatment facilities, reform schools, drug treatment, and those should all have the goals of helping the adolescents during those time periods, helping them with their academics, helping them make sure all their basic needs are met, such as food and a safe place to sleep. If they're on drugs or alcohol, getting them off of those things. So social workers can be very beneficial during these times. It's very important for them to have positive knowledge, values, and skills to help the youth, and also to help the community, family, organizations. They could intervene as far as being a counselor, a school worker, drug and alcohol counselor, or they could help with spending time in the community, seeing how people spend their time and what their goals are. They can help people or those that are involved in gangs learn self-determination, learn autonomy, and see what they can do to help their community and also to help their own situations. Also, they can help those that are impoverished or come from disorganized households, help the parents take parenting classes if they don't have the correct skills to raise the youth, make sure that the youth have access to a positive, thriving school system where they feel cared about, help them with status, having excitement in a positive way, making them have stability, connecting them to the people in the community that could help them. Could be traditional community institutions, it could be police, schools, religious institutions, making sure they have safe places to hang out, job training, learn about resources that might be there to help their family in the current situations, such as food donations, clothing donations, and then maybe working on some laws or some policies within that city or state that could help those adolescents. This section of the chapter talks about groups and group leadership. So a group was two or more individuals that interact. They have things in common. So first we're going to look at recreation groups, and they provide activities that people enjoy, or it could be exercise. You could think of your neighborhood YMCA. It can help build character and then keep kids from getting out of trouble and gives them an alternative, a safe place to be if home isn't safe and the streets aren't safe. There are recreation skill groups, and that's where people can hone in on a certain skill. It could be chess club, it could be riding bikes or taekwondo, but they have an instructor or a coach that can help them along the way. There are educational groups that help people gain knowledge and learn skills that are more complex. Task groups, and they're there to help with a specific task. So it could be cleaning up a certain neighborhood, it could be raising money for a basketball court, but basically they're there for a certain goal, and then afterwards it can be disbanded, and that will go into task force or an ad hoc community. But it's very important that these different groups are looked into. There's also problem solving and decision making groups. It's helping people grow. It's helping people find resilience and autonomy. It's also helping them trust. So they can have a treatment plan, help them with locating resources. This is really good for social workers to help with. Deal with policy decisions and improve the coordination between these organizations in order to help the adolescent and the community. Focus groups basically dealing with identifying the issues and how to deal with those issues and like what approach they should use to deal with those issues. A representative group is just basically enough people of that certain group to be represented into a smaller group, um, just to make sure that you get more perspectives of what the community might want. There are self-help groups where people try to better their situation, and sometimes it's great having other people there to hold them accountable and then also to support them when they're going through difficult times. So some of these are listed as habit disturbance organizations, and that could, be something as helping someone stop smoking. General purpose organizations, it could address any problem in the area. It could be that a child is abused and just making sure that children that are abused are put into safe places. Lifestyle organizations, it could help people advocate for just dealing with a chronic illness or maybe losing a family member. Physical handicap organizations, this one deals with major chronic illnesses, the ones that change the course of someone's life, and usually people might become isolated, so it gives them other people to relate to and talk to. Significant other organizations, and that's just they're a part of an organization because of significant other. So you can think of maybe military spouses, so they are the support for the military member, and then they also can support one another because everyone in society won't understand what that's like. So there are many ways to help people. Social workers can be great at this. They can help understand what an issue is, identify it, get testimonies from people in the community or maybe from someone who's already been through that situation. They support one another, make sure people understand the issue, help others and feel good about helping others, advocate for others, socialize for skill development, and to help others who might have gone through something that has shaken their world or shaken their belief systems. There's different types of therapies that can be there to help people. So leadership is there just to make sure things are like that these groups are effective, that there's good dynamic, that there's competence, that there's cultural competence, positive attitudes and behaviors, things and goals for people to accomplish, and just to keep the people going, and then also to support them during those time periods. To talk about any social problems or individual problems. There's also encounter groups that help people relate to one another personally, and just for people who maybe have something difficult, or maybe more of the population hasn't dealt with it, so they don't feel like they have anyone that they know. But if they go specifically to a group of people that have dealt with the same issue, it can help this person get through it. So there's different ways of dealing with group development, personal development, individual development. Continuing on with groups, there are different models that can be looked at depending on what the community needs. But there are groups that get together, they wrestle with power and control of who should have what duties, who shouldn't have certain duties, and who's a leader, who's not a leader. How do they support one another? How do they actually feel intimate as far as expressing themselves and feeling accepted? How are they able to differentiate and maybe move on if the issue has been solved for them? And how do they successfully separate? So there are different models in here. There's a Tuckman model, and they give examples of the different stages that people can go through with groups. And the Schiller model does the same. So it talks about the group getting together, brainstorming, having a norm of how they want people to behave in their group, actually performing those goals, whatever they might be, and then adjourning. So that would just be the group disbands because the situation has been fixed. Like maybe they're coming together to get gangs out of the area, and many people in the community work together to make sure they understand what's going on, how can they improve the problem, and then also talk to the gangs to make sure that children or adolescents aren't going to be brought into the group or persuaded to be in the group. There's different maintenance roles, so there's different people who can be leaders. Different people are more want to be delegated to. They want to be supporters. So there are different types of participation. It could be someone who helps with communication, somebody that summarizes, somebody that helps coordinate, somebody that helps build momentum and energy, somebody that helps starts. And then the chapter goes into leadership theories. And Some people believe that leaders are born, they're not made, and then other people believe that leaders can be made over time. So people that have charisma, people want to do what they say, they like them, they want to be around them. And then there's Machiavellianism, and that's where it's more authoritarian. They have a lot of power and control, and they leave little room for other people. And they have less emotions tied into whatever the situation might be. There are other approaches when it comes to leadership. It could be a position approach, and it's basically where we look at people in high level positions and just study them and see if they have certain characteristics. There's also leadership style approach. There could be authoritarian, where a person has absolute power and they know where the group's going. There could be democratic leadership, where it's slow decision making, but many people or all of the people are able to get their concerns brought up and dealt with. And then there's laissez-faire style, where the leader doesn't participate, but the people who are involved in the group, who have the biggest stake in the situation, are able to work together, and the leader is there maybe to help calm things down if things were to get um, deal with combat. Then there is the distributed functions approach, and that's making sure people know what their job is and are able to function as that. Then there's a servant leadership approach, and that's more of what a teacher would do, basically making sure the students or the people in the group are able to accomplish what their goals are, support them through it, help people grow, have personal growth, have group growth. They have to listen, have empathy, be healing, be aware, persuasive. They can help conceptualize things, so put things into a way that people can see it or understand it, have foresight, and that just means that they're able to see what the outcome could be. Stewardship, so they're basically wanting to help others above them and wanting to make sure that they help the entire group. Committed to helping people grow, and then also to building communities. So servant leadership could be a lifelong approach. It's just making sure people are happier, empowered. They think as a system. They deal with trust, collaboration, empathy, and they're very productive.